Yeah, that's right. Gin Greymane has returned in Hearthstone Cataclysm, a brand new legendary card here. Gin Cursed King. This one is a 4-mana 5/4. And it reads, while holding this, if the rest of your hand is all even or all odd, transform into the Worgen King. And you'll see here the Worgen King becomes a 6/5, so a bit of a stat upgrade. And Battlecry, upgrade your starting hero power. It costs 1. So much like the old hero powers from GENN and BAKU here, this is sort of fusing both of them together. So not only are you getting the upgrade from BAKU, you're getting the discount from GENN, creating a sort of superhero power. So, for warrior, that's going to be 1 mana, gain 4 armor. For druid, that's going to be 1 mana, deal 2 attack and gain 2 armor. For hunter, 1 mana, deal 3 damage. Right, I'm not going to go through literally every combination, but you get the idea. You do get a pretty nice hero power here out of GENN Worgen King. The challenge for this card is going to be, and I do think some people are, I'm not going to say overlooking this one, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a tougher challenge than people think it is for GENN. Because, having an entire hand that is basically all even or all odd is not a trivial matter. Like sometimes, sure, you'll just kind of like randomly kind of happenstance your way into it, where it's like, oh hey, look, it's like I got 2s and 4s and I happen to have this 1 cost card and I can play this 1 cost card or whatever, and GENN will be active and it might feel pretty clean. I think there's going to be other instances though where you have just cards in hand that you don't really need or want to play right now that might be the things that help you satisfy your GENN Cursed King, just depending a little bit on sort of like the deck shape and the curve and everything else too, right? It's you might have a 2-cost card you don't want to play right now, but you need to play your 2-cost card. Or you're just going to get stuck with hands that are half and half, and it's going to take forever for GENN Cursed King to actually line up. So, there's sort of a deck building challenge. Like, can I build a deck that's mostly even or mostly odd? And is that worth it for GENN Cursed King? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, even these upgraded hero powers that are discounted, that's good. It's definitely something you'd love to have. I don't think it's like a win condition, right? It's still just ultimately a hero power. It's just, this kind of incremental gain turn after turn. It's not this like big, game winning sort of result. It will occasionally give you an edge here and there. I could imagine warrior loving all the extra armor gain or whatever. I could imagine some priests actually loving the extra healing. We also saw some ways to turn healing into damage. Like, yeah, I can see decks that care about it. I'm not saying you won't care about it. It's just that, like, how much can you really sacrifice from either a deck building standpoint or even within a game, a sort of game line standpoint where you're tweaking your plays and changing everything a little bit just to make GENN line up and, like, massage your hand into that perfect state for GENN. I think both of those are going to be a demand that actually make GENN pretty hard to run, where it's just like the juice is not worth the squeeze, as they say. It's like, man, I had to work too hard for this, and at the end of the day, it's a cool hero power. Don't get me wrong, it's great, but is it worth changing 2 or 3 turns worth of plays? Is it worth sacrificing my deck construction in a couple ways to, like, reduce the number of odd cost cards I have or whatever? Another way to get there is, like, emptying your hand, of course. If you just don't have a lot of cards in hand, then certainly that makes GENN easier to achieve. So, like, maybe an aggro deck that's going to naturally get a small hand anyway could utilize GENN. But how many classes hero powers actually play super well with that? Maybe Hunter. So you could see, like, GENN Cursed King perhaps as a payoff in a Hunter deck where you're like, hey, yeah, I'll just eventually get this 3 damage hero power super cheap. Maybe that's okay. I'm still not like super excited about that line though, frankly. I feel like still a bit of a challenge and still a payoff basically that takes multiple turns to really feel worth it. Because just like 1 hero power, okay, cool, but I might need 3 or 4 turns of hero powers to feel like I've really, utilized the GENN Greymane in a big way. Spoiler alert. So in essence, I just think this one's a little more awkward and a little slower than I've seen some reactions from. This card's been out like the better part of a day, so I've had plenty of time to see people's thoughts on this one, unlike normal. I think it's fine. I'm not going to say a deck can't make it work. I just don't think this is an everywhere, every deck sort of card by any means. I think it's going to have fairly restricted use cases. All right, so moving on to that Broxigar's Last Stand. This is the first of a handful of Last Stand spells we're going to look at in this video, which are kind of tying the lore from last expansion to this expansion. I think is really cool, by the way, having a connected storyline across sets. I think it'd be cool if they did that in the future again. But anyway, this is a 2-mana Demon Hunter spell. It deals 1 damage to all minions and draws a card for each that died, making this sort of like a super mortal coil that can hit a ton of different stuff. And I think that makes this a super good card, actually. I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios where this just cleans up 3 or 4 things and draws you 3 or 4 cards for 2 mana, which is going to feel incredibly great. And I think Demon Hunter 2 is a class that tends to have enough little increments of damage where they can kind of line stuff up and soften stuff up, you know, use your hero power on a 2 health thing, use you know, an I-beam on a 4 health thing, whatever, right? And create some little board states where I think this is very likely to just, you know, sweep up a ton of stuff, and this becomes just a powerhouse of a draw engine that has this nice little bonus. So or, you know, sometimes just a board of 1/1s is going to happen too. Your opponent summons a bunch of tokens or whatever, and you're just thrilled because this is the best card in your deck by a mile at that point, because you wipe their entire board and draw 5 cards or whatever. I think, you know, you don't need to draw 5, by the way, for this to feel great. It's going to feel like a fine card sometimes, just drawing a couple things. You might also put this in a deck where you're killing off your own stuff in some cases. You know, we have that jar legendary whose name I can't remember, who's like making your 1/1 jars or whatever. It's an example of, like, you know, you could use Broxigars to kill off your own jars or some other little death rattles, eggs, whatever, right? Build a deck that actually supports this for your own minions is another possibility, but I don't even think you need that. But either way, this card just looks really, really strong. It is doing a lot for only 2 mana. So next up, the Death Knight Last Stand card here. This is Talanji's Last Stand. 5 mana, double Unholy Rune. And it reads, give your minions Death Rattle, summon a random 4-cost minion. Which clearly here meant for kind of a swarming token style deck where you're going to have a pretty wide board of stuff, and you can use this 5 mana card to sort of stabilize that board. It's Soul of the Forest-esque vibes here, but on that note, very expensive at 5 mana. Sometimes it's going to feel like this just doesn't look all that great. You know, I was thinking we just played some of that like Eudora Treasure Rogue or whatever, and we were getting that Duels Treasure that did the same sort of thing, but for legendary minions. Canopic Jars, I believe it's called, right? This guy. And it's like, this card didn't even really feel that good, you know? And it's like, this is a way better card. Now, you know, obviously deck construction, like, you know, presumably Talanji's Last Stand would be in a deck that's better able to utilize it. But my point is, like, it's not that great of a payoff in the average game of Hearthstone, because you just don't really stick that many boards into future turns. And when you do, you typically rather leverage those boards to end the game as opposed to sort of give yourself a second wave of stuff like Talanji's Last Stand here would do. So it's just a question, like, is there a sticky enough double Unholy Death Knight deck that can get into a turn 5 where this feels like a good play? Because I think, you know, you probably want 3 things on board for this to really feel worth it, at least. 2 is, like, theoretically, yeah, that's 8 mana worth of stuff, but it's not really, right? Because average 4 drops is, you know, they're not going to be very good results, and just summoning 2 random 4 drops, you know, you want battle cries, you want effects, you want abilities, you want game plans, none of which this provides. It's just stats and dead bodies on board. So, you know, I think it's just going to be really hard to get this to line up. And it's not a card that's, you know, going to be played alongside the summoning stuff at the same time, at least at a stage of the game where it's early enough that it would matter. Like, sure, you know, go into turn 10, summon stuff for 3 or 4 mana and then play this. That's going to happen. It could, but that's not going to be a strong play on turn 9 or 10 either, you know? So I think this has to be something that's landing on curve to make an impact, and it's going to be really hard to get this to line up well on curve. Even just getting a double Unholy deck together might actually be a challenge too. So all of those things do seem like it's going to make Talanji's Last Stand pretty hard to work with. Next up here is Garona's Last Stand. This is a 2 mana tradable spell, and it reads, destroy a legendary minion, which back in my day of Hearthstone, we had Rind Blackhand, a 7-mana card that conditionally did the same thing. My God, we've come a long way since so very long ago. But I actually think this card's kind of decent. You know, tradable fixes a lot of problems, number one, right? It's just nice to have tradable. It just increases the playability of a card by a notable degree because the timing aspect of it is suddenly not such a big downside. Is Rogue a class that probably loves tradable as much as others? Not necessarily, because they might have a lot of cheap cycle anyway, but it just helps. It makes it feel a lot smoother to push this into a deck. And I think we're going into an expansion with like colossal minions and stuff where, you know, being able to destroy a legendary really cheaply is pretty nice. And frankly, most decks just have a lot of legendary minions in them. You know, a majority of metas are going to give you good targets for this, where this just feels like a good swingy card. Sometimes, yeah, it'll just be used on an Elise on turn 4, and that's not actually a bad thing. I think that's okay. Using a 2-mana spell to remove an Elise, kind of okay if you think about it, right? A lot of like 2-mana deal 3 minion clears you're okay with. This is going to be a 2-mana deal 5 in many instances, just because there's enough random little legendary stuff. Could it occasionally feel like it's stuck in hand or you know, going to have a bad matchup? Maybe, but that's where the tradable, you know, sort of greases the wheels a little bit and makes this card feel smoother. So I don't think every rogue's going to make room for this. I don't think, you know, every meta is necessarily going to make room for this, but particularly with Colossals in mind, yes, of course, it'll leave behind the appendages or whatever, but in many cases, killing the big scary effect of the Colossal, like we saw with Arisen Onyxia and Death Knight or whatever, might be the important thing, and this could be a super cheap way to do that. So I think Rona's Last Stand is actually a pretty solid card. Moving on to Rafam's Last Stand. This is a 3-mana spell. It reads, deal 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions, and then that's going to upgrade each turn. So, you know, after a turn in hand, it becomes deal 3, and then deal 4, and then deal 5, and then deal 6, which I think this is okay. I could see this actually being a fine removal card in some kind of late game control style Warlock, which does tend to pop up here and there. Even a Rafam deck, you know, could be a fit for this. It's going to take you a while sometimes to win those Rafam games, and you need just little removal like this. If you're going to go to turn 10 anyway, sometimes this will be a pretty nice way to deal, you know, 10 damage or something to a couple minions. Could clean up a decently sized threat on board in some instances. It is one of those cards that does suck to top deck, though. Like, it's a really, really bad top deck. You just don't usually want to spend 3 mana to do this sort of effect off the top. So, you know, it's just going to have the exact right slow deck that can afford to hold on to this one and not be in a dire situation where they desperately need removal or whatever. But I think that's still okay. I think a Rafam deck control Warlock can get some use out of this. Moving on here to Warrior, this is Logash's Last Stand. It is a 5-mana spell. It reads, give a minion Death Rattle, summon a random minion from your hand, which I love this art, dude. This is so sick. Brol and Logash and Valyria, really, really cool, but throwing the elemental is very funny. But I just don't think this card is any good, man. It is a really tough one to work with. Just 5 mana number 1 to like summon a minion from hand. Yes, of course you can cheat some big stuff out. Yeah, sure, you get a 10 mana card out of it, but how consistently are you going to get that 10 mana card out of it? You know, how many other minions are in your hand? This doesn't say like summon the highest cost minion from your hand. So if your deck is only exclusively big stuff, maybe that works, but then you've got a crazy deck building challenge. Like I gotta have some smaller, lower cost minions in my deck, particularly because I need a minion on board to use this on, right? Like I can't just use this on another big minion. So, you know, I gotta have some low cost stuff that's maybe like sticky, maybe some eggs on board or whatever. It could be a way to do this, where you get some sticky threats on board that you know, have a body left over. Or use something really cheap to play immediately alongside it, which is now suddenly like at least a 6 cost play. I guess you could do Wisp style stuff technically, but you know what I mean? It's all kind of delayed, and then the thing you need to enable this suddenly breaks the deck because you got that other Wisp in hand, you got the other egg in hand, or you know, suddenly you really whiff, which you just cannot afford to whiff with a card like this because it is so slow, so delayed, so passive. It's crazy on the back foot compared to what your opponents will be doing. You can't whiff. You have to hit an insane result. So I just like, I don't know what the deck looks like. I don't know what moment you're able to play this safely. There's just so much about this that can go wrong. And I think that means this card basically never gets played. maybe some just insane death rattle synergies or something, but it looks really tough to make this one work. So then our final card here is Muradin's Last Stand. This is a 9 mana nature spell. It draws 2 cards, and it costs 1 less for each time a friendly character attacked this game, which, you know, attacks for both hero and minions, of course, will count there. I think this card's kind of insane if you're going first, because, you know, if you're going first, it's far more likely that you're going to be doing the attacking with your minions, whereas if you're playing second, if you've got the coin, sometimes you're playing down minions and your opponent is removing them before they ever get a chance to attack, or they're trading into your minions with their minions before yours ever get a chance to attack, which is really potentially going to limit the number of attacks you're able to get. So, man, this card could be really feast or famine just depending on that. But, you know, if you get a 1-drop out and it's attacking, you get a 2-drop down and it's attacking, and the opponent's always behind, each turn you're discounting this, you know, 1-2 mana even, starts to stack up really fast. Now, of course, a couple things change that. Rush minions always hit, right? If you're running a lot of rush minions, that means every turn, you know, you reliably are getting your Muradin discounted. And of course, face attacks, particularly Wind Fury and stuff too, can add up to a lot of extra. And you know, we have the package from last set with the cheap, you know, give your hero 1 attack spells. So, you know, like your hero could also be attacking, you know, pretty often, every other turn or something. So yeah, I think by the time you get to turn 5 in many games, this could already be, you know, like 2 mana, draw 2 or something. I say that's a 7 cost discount by turn 5. I don't know if that's true. It's not impossible for sure, but I think that's actually still going to be kind of challenging. And I really want this to be 0, right? Like even 2 mana, draw 2, not bad, but not crazy compared to other card draw in the game. I really want this to be 1 or 0, which means I need like 8 or 9 attacks from my stuff to get this card good. Is that happening by turn 5 often? Not really, right? Is that even happening by turn 7 often? Sometimes, yeah, and it's really only in a deck that's forcing it too in some cases, and then maybe coin games it falls off hard. Guys, I don't know. I thought this card was better, but as I'm doing the math in my head and just thinking about how games unfold, I'm afraid this is gonna get stuck sometimes. And that's actually the last thing you want for your card draw. Like when you're on the back foot and you really desperately need a play, you don't want to have to like be staring at a 5 mana draw 2, right? With like no way to make it cheaper. Oh man, that makes me nervous on this one. I think the potential is still there on a deck that really forces it. A lot of rush, those face attacks like we talked about. So you can't write it off because it will in some decks be a 0 mana draw 2, and that's going to feel really good. But those decks might be few and far between. I think a lot of decks won't be able to reliably discount this fast enough, and they will just have to ignore this because it's going to be like 7 mana draw 2, 5 mana draw 2 for way too long. And that's honestly a pretty big problem. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. GENN Cursed King is a 3-star card. Broxigar's Last Stand is a 4-star card. Talanji's Last Stand is a 2-star card. Garona's Last Stand is a 4-star card. Rafam's Last Stand is a 3-star card. Logash's Last Stand is a 1-star card. Muradin's Last Stand is a 3-star card. Maybe only barely. Thought about giving this one 2, honestly. But that's it for the Last Stand cards today, and we got this cool new GENN Cursed King. I'm excited to try this one. I hope we're in a meta where these upgraded hero powers feel impactful, because I think that'd be a sign that we're in a bit of a slower meta, and you know, grindier stuff like that has time to really start to stack up and be meaningful. I hope that's true. Not super confident that it will be true. Just, you know, modern era Hearthstone. Sometimes you don't have 3 or 4 turns always to benefit from something like a hero power to really make it worth it. You know, it's a good 1-cost play as soon as it happens, right? But to make it worth the sort of 4 mana upfront investment, you probably need a few. So we'll see, I guess. Most people seem to have more faith in this one than I do, which perhaps that's a good sign for its success. But anyway, share your thoughts on all these cards down below. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.